everyone, and since it's close to Halloween, the next thing we thought we'd read is different chapters from Even More Scary Mysteries for Sleepovers. Chapter 1 is called CheckMate. Russell Vanny walked slowly down Birchen Avenue, checking the street addresses against the number he had written on a piece of notepaper. The phone call had been very specific. He was to meet his friend in front of 566 Birchen Avenue at exactly 4 p.m. to discuss a matter of life or death. Though Russell was aware that his friend was prone to exaggeration, the tension in his friend's voice told him that this meeting was probably pretty important. With a full minute to spare, Russell found himself standing in front of 566 Birchen Avenue, which turned out to be a pawn shop. Why would his friend pick such an odd place to meet? Usually when they got together it was a mall or at a food place. Nervously he checked his watch. It was exactly 4 o'clock, but his friend was nowhere in sight. Starting to get impatient, Russell suddenly heard something move above him, and when he looked up and saw 3 large brass spears hanging directly overhead, each about the size of a basketball. He recognized these spears as the ancient symbol for pawnbroker. Now someone was moving around amongst the wires that held these balls in place, although his position prevented Russell from seeing who it was. Before Russell could figure out what was happening, he heard something go snap, and a moment later the 3 balls came crashing down on him. He barely had a chance to cry out before one of the spears hit him on the top of the head with a loud thunk. His body instantly convulsed, then fell lifeless to the sidewalk. The next morning, the entire student body of Niles Junior High was called to the student school's auditorium. When the principal grimly announced the death of Russell Vernon to the stunned crowd, Tony Loring was particularly shocked and saddened by the news. He and Russell had been members of the school's prize-winning chess club since the 6th grade. They had spent many an afternoon huddled over a red and black square game board, locked in a stirring battle of wits. Now she would never ever see him again. That afternoon, Tony and the 15 other chess club members gathered in the science classroom, where they met every Tuesday and Thursday, and the first thing on everyone's lips was the death of Russell Vernon. "It's so strange," noted Pardon Corroy, who, as always, was wearing one of her mother's hand-knitted sweaters. "I mean, what are the odds of being accidentally killed by a falling pawnshop symbol? 1 in a zillion?" "Maybe it wasn't exactly an accident," suggested Reggie Baranum, nervously twirling a plastic ballpoint pen between his fingers. "Who would want to kill Russell?" Ross Slotin objected. Russell had been one of Ross's best friends, and the boy's death had hit him particularly hard. If someone did want to kill him, there had to be a simpler way to do it. "Fellow chess players," Tony said grimly, "I suggest we dedicate the rest of this year's competitions to the memory of Russell Vernon, chess player extraordinaire." The other players voiced their agreement, then broke out the chessboards to begin their weekly games. Patty Conroy received a call just minutes after she'd gotten home from school. Her friend had asked her to meet him over by Beckman's cornfield right away. It was, in his words, a matter of life and death. Now, standing with her bike just off the narrow asphalt road that ran along the cornfield, Patty began to wonder why her friend had chose such a strange, out-of-the-way place to meet. From where she stood, she couldn't see another living soul. The only obvious sign of life were a dozen or so huge black crows circling overhead. For a moment, Patty thought that Russell Vernon's awful death and shivered. Still upset over recent events and feeling slightly paranoid, she was checking her watch impatiently when she heard a rustling sound in the tall corn behind her. Spinning around, she thought she saw a dark form move along the large leafy stalks. "Hello," she called, moving closer to the field's edge. "Is that you?" Suddenly someone leaped out of the cornfield, holding a large plastic bucket, giving a high-pitched "Yeah!" He hurled the bucket's container directly at her. A split second later, Patty was hit by what felt like a load of wet sand. But when the desk cleared, her coughing subsided and she brushed her eyes clear. She saw that she was covered in a strange, powder-yellow substance. It took her a moment to recognize it, and when she did, she was more confused than ever. "This is cornmeal, you idiot!" she cried. "You called me out to cover me here. Cornmeal? What are you, completely out of your mind?" "Checkmate," her attacker replied with a sly smile, then backed up into the row of stocks, vanishing from sight before Patty ever saw who pulled this bizarre stunt. Patty stood just there, looking like a yellow ghost, trying in vain to understand why this was happening to her. She was still standing there by the roadside when she heard a loud caw of one of the circling crows. Before she could even look up, one of the birds swooped in and pecked several times at her head before flying off. "Ouch!" Patty screamed, flailing her arms wildly. "Get away from me!" Then two more crows swooped in and stabbed at her with their sharp beaks. Patty shrieked at the top of her lungs and turned to run, but because she was blinded by the frantic beating of the bird's wings, she tripped and fell face first into the ground. Within seconds, the entire flock was upon her, their claws digging into her skin as they pecked away at the cornmeal, covering her from head to toe. Patty Conroy was pecked to death, Tony Loring cried in disbelief. "That's awful! How could such a thing like that ever happen?" "She was over at Buckman's cornfield, and a bunch of crows have decided to have her for lunch," Reddy Bowman replied. "They were standing at their lockers before class." "It sounds like something out of a horror movie," Mark Mutters said with a glimpse from the 3 lockers away. Mark had been one of the class's top chess players until 3 months ago when he flunked history and was banned from participating in the extracurricular activities until his grades improved. His loss had been a blow to the club. They had been counting on Mark to lead them to victory in the recent all-city chess tournament. As it turned out, their team still won the junior high middle school level championship, but just barely. "What an awful way to go, don't you think?" he added with a shudder. "You realize that makes 2 chess club members who have died under mysterious circumstances in the last few days," Tony said anxiously. "What are the odds of that being a coincidence?" "Astronomically," Mark said with a worried look. "Which means that maybe they weren't accidents," Reggie replied, swallowing nervously. "Maybe someone is out to kill all of us." "Well, personally, I think you're just being a little paranoid," Mark said. "But if you want, I could ask my cousin Pete for some advice. He used to be a private detective." "I'm going straight to the police," Tony announced. "If someone is trying to knock off all the chess club members, he has to be stopped before he strikes again." Reggie was caught completely by surprise. One minute he was walking through the medieval arts exhibit at the city's World History Museum. The next he was lying dead